you realize that you have things to be thankful for and you practice gratitude, then the whole of your life will, like, at least your perspective will begin to change. Like, all of a sudden, instead of being despondent and, self-hating, you're going to realize, wow, like, my life is actually pretty good. And that's one of those things where then once you begin to be thankful for what you have, then you realize, oh, I actually have something to offer. I have time, I have energy, I have money, whatever it is, and I can begin to offer that to other people. And that's where, this is regardless of whether or not you're married or single. Like, the thing about it is relationships are the most important part of living this life. You've got all these people, like, going back to the illegal aliens. Yeah, dude, I think that's crazy. The Supreme Court ruled that an illegal alien, in Chicago no less, has the ability to carry a firearm, where most citizens in that state as well as that city are prohibited from owning a firearm unless they pass stringent guidelines and pay all this money. It's
well, why not at this?
Disconcerting.
Why not at this point, right? I mean, we might as well just start issuing them their own firearm when they come in across the border, right?
Right. Yeah. Here's your $10,000, your gift card, your hotel stay, and your complimentary firearm from the ATF. And
your pistola.
Yeah, I can never remember the guy's name, but the head of the ATF was sitting there talking about how they need to be tracking cash transactions for people who are purchasing in excess of $1,000 worth of firearms. And he's like, oh, this way we can find out, like, where they're buying and, like, what they're buying. And then you look at the fact that they ran fast and furious and are literally pitching all these firearms over the border to people who are going to just bring them over or whatever. It's like, it's a ruse. It's so lame.
Well, I just don't there is, I guess it's the way, like, is there even a thought process? It's like, what? Because I immediately always try and go, okay, let me think about this from a perspective that's not my own. Like, if I'm coming across the border illegally, like, do I have the right to have a firearm in that situation? Like, in any scenario? Like,
I think that there's an argument for being able to defend yourself that comes from God, right? And all that the United States Constitution did was enumerate rights that are already ours. It's not like they were granted to us. It just codified them in law so that you don't have the government doing or running roughshod over you and saying, well, you can't own a gun or you can't do this and you can't do that. It's like, no, you don't get to determine that. And for thousands of years, that's what was happening, and we're kind of back there. So does an illegal alien have the right to self-defense? Absolutely. Is a pistol or a rifle one of the best tools for defending yourself? Absolutely. But those rights as codified are for U.S. citizens. And, of course, like,
right.
That's where that argument kind of... I don't think it falls apart, but you're not a United States citizen. You are breaking the law to be here. So why would the rights enumerated to you or to an American citizen who is complying with the law be available to you also? Like,
well, and I know so we all know where the right side stands when it comes to guns and gun rights and the right to protect yourself. What really just, I guess, where like it shocks me that's where they landed with that was that, on the left side, the more liberal viewpoint of firearms is they're trying to restrict them more. I mean, they're trying to essentially take away, the ability to protect yourself, to protect your family, to protect your community. And if that's been what they have been pushing for a long time, or at least more gun laws. Like, I don't know if everybody, I wouldn't say not everybody on the left is looking to completely do away with the Second Amendment and being able to protect yourself, but there definitely are a large number of people who would like to do away with that because they don't think that it's necessary anymore. If that's the case, then why on earth would they then turn around and say, okay, we know that different countries in South America and Africa and other places are literally emptying their prisons and they are sending them here to cross into the United States And then the response is like, yes, you can have a firearm.
Yeah. It's not so much a sticky situation. I mean, the question at large is, well, why is this happening? It's engineered for a purpose. That purpose is probably destabilization and chaos. So, if you are emptying your prisons and you do want to, if you want to have a draconian or authoritarian lockdown, well, what better way than to arm millions of people? I mean, they're not giving everybody a gun, but all these criminals coming in and having weapons available to them, then it's going to be pretty hard for even an armed populace to combat that. So that's probably the big thing that is being pushed forward there. There's just no consistency. This is one of those things we see with advertising for the Vanish holster, for instance. Their terms of service on the ad platforms are that you can't sell a weapon, and then they have a couple different sections of types of accessories that you can and cannot sell. So almost anything that you can attach to a firearm, like a weapon-mounted light or an optic system or something like a trigger, blah, 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 those kinds of things, you can't advertise those for sale. But a holster, which is essentially a retention device or a safety device for a pistol, is completely within the terms of service. Like, you're allowed to sell that. They have no restrictions on that whatsoever. And so when you go to advertise and you're advertising your holster and inside of the holster is a gun, sometimes it goes through, their ad is approved, and sometimes it's not. And then when you find out, or when you ask, like, why was it disapproved? And they're telling you, well, because of guns. And it's like, yeah, but the other ad that we ran at the exact same time went through and got approved. And your terms of service don't restrict this. Like, that's ultimately the thing. Is like, you say we can do this. You say that we can sell devices for the safety and retention, and they work with guns. So, like, obviously we're going to include a gun in there. And then you look at other people running ads, and they're getting away. Like, I'm not complaining here. It's just the inconsistency. They're getting away with shooting guns. They're getting away with all of these other things. And you're like, well, why can't we do that? And so the same kind of thing is happening here with the government. It's like they're just being so inconsistent. And it's maddening. And you don't want to feel like you're being victimized, but it makes people feel like that. It's why the right has lashed back so seriously these past few years. It's why Trump's on the ballot again, and like very well could win, because people are like, are you kidding me? Like, you are absolutely trashing this country, and then you're not being just in how you run this country. Like Biden flying over 320,000 immigrants across state lines or the national border to prevent there being a backlog at the border. Like, you just circumvented all kinds of constitutional laws to do something. And, if we left the country and tried to come back in without a passport, we'd never be able to do that. Like, what the heck?
No, there's a lot of double standards going on for sure. And man, like, I really try to stay away from conspiracy theories. Like, I'm one of those people where it's like, I hear them and I'm going, it could be true. Is it something that, like, I'm going to go out there and start telling people I think what's actually happening? Like, probably not. In almost all scenarios, like almost all of them, I typically don't go out there and spread that type of information.
Right.
But where I am right now is it makes one thing for sure. I don't feel, I no longer believe that the government really actually has the best interest of the citizens in mind anymore. Like, no. I don't feel like when the decisions up there being made are like, is this, are the people that we are actually here to serve? Like, are we protecting them? Are we putting, like, when the fathers or the mothers who are taking business trips and going and traveling, like, can they now travel safely? Can they leave their families feeling like they are in a secure, safe environment? Like, no, like, I don't feel that way anymore. I don't feel like, do I feel like I live in a pretty safe area? Yes. Do I feel like confident that for the most part things are okay right now? Yeah. But as I watch more and more of this unravel and deteriorate, like, all these decisions are just continually putting me in a situation where I'm asking more and more questions, and I keep arriving at, like, it does not appear that the decisions that are being made actually truly are in the best interest of the people that, that are United States citizens, like have been living here lawfully, you know, and living the American dream and trying to create, the same opportunities for their families. I mean, I go back to like my grandparents. I mean, they were born here, but they were, I think they were second generation Americans. I think it was that, my family originally came from like Germany and Czechoslovakia and I think one other country, but what I think about like my grandfather who served in World War II and the sacrifices that he made, and his brother who died fighting in World War II, and I mean just countless and countless others, like, and I think part of what they were fighting for was the ability of people to come here. Again, going back, like being a descendant of people who did come here from Europe. I believe that was something that they were fighting for as well. And it's just, man, there's got to be a balance. Like, this country has become one overreaction, or overcorrection after another. So it's like one person takes office and there's this massive overcorrection and the pendulum swings too far one direction. And then our system is supposed to be designed for a correction. So then it swings back like, the other direction. And it's like, when's that pendulum going to fall off? And it's like, man, it's getting really difficult to not believe that the pendulum has broken off at this point.
Well, I think it's hard to argue that things are not what, or how do I say this? So things are more than what they seem. I think that was well exemplified in 2020 when everything was starting to happen and we had people, the canaries in the coal mines, if you will, who were saying, look, like this is going to lead down this path. This is what could possibly happen if you allow for X, Y, and Z to proliferate. I was one of those people. I was like, this is not a good thing. Whether it was, requiring vaccines for students or government workers without any body of evidence to show that these were safe and effective. Whether that was around like restrictions on travel or free speech, being able to speak openly on owned platforms, which are essentially the public square. Just saying like, look, if you start doing that kind of thing, if you start restricting speech, then that means that at some point, it's going to allow for more and more propaganda to exist. And then just with all of this, you're saying you're not a conspiracy theorist, but you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to look and know that something is fundamentally wrong. Like there is something wrong with a sovereign nation allowing for people to cross the border without any kind of repercussions. I mean, there was just a story this morning about this Maryland teacher who is an illegal immigrant. So he's hired by the state. He's been deported 2 times already, and he was just arrested for sexually abusing 2 children. So, I mean, that could have been an American citizen. Yeah, but he shouldn't have been here in the first place. He shouldn't have even had the opportunity to make it back into the United States and criminally violate children. And that's what you see all over the place. I mean, with these stories around these girls who've recently been killed by illegal immigrants, it's not to say that like these people are bad, like by and large, people coming in, but it's showing that the system is broken, that there needs to be some way of modulating how people come into this country. And, again, like if we're going to talk about double standards, how many people go through the naturalization process of becoming a citizen and how long that takes, how much money they have to pay. And then these other people are actually just allowed to come in and essentially are incentivized to invade the United States. Like there is no conspiracy when you see that it's like they're openly allowing it.
When I have talked to the people that have come here legally and with all the travel that I've done, a lot of a good number of these folks, at least the ones that I've met, have ended up being like Uber drivers. And to be honest, they're some of the best conversations that I have. They absolutely love the United States. They believe it's the best place in the world to live. It's why they left where they were. I mean, I remember having a conversation with one guy. It took him 2 years or more to get his entire family here. And on their way out, to get out of the country, it required them going through zones where they were being shot at. One of their family members actually died in the process because of the wars that were taking place. And I look at, when I think about the process, like there's a very specific process that somebody goes through when they come to the United States, when they're doing it through the correct channels. And I think when somebody goes through that process, I don't know if it's, obviously there's cognitive dissonance involved. Like when somebody's investing into something and like part of becoming a citizen, like you learn about the country, you learn about how our country works, why it was done that way, who did it, why they did it. And there's all of these things that you learn to where like when you get on the other side, you're like, I get it. Like I get why this is something that like needs to be protected and championed. And the correct people need to be overseeing that. And like, but again, there's this process that they go through. So when they get out on another point, they met the minimum criteria to even be able to go through the process. Now they've gone through it. Now they're on the other side and like, they get it. Like I came from somewhere, but by going through this process, I'm now saying that like, I will stand up for this flag, and I will live a life that represents what it stands for and what it means. And now we're letting people in by droves that aren't going through that process. They don't have any appreciation for what's been given or what's been lost in order for us to gain this life that we have. And I go back to the firearm thing as well. It's like, again, there's like even for the people that like for the people that are carrying here legally, I mean, at a minimum, like not most, I don't know if it's most, but I know, speaking for myself and the people in my immediate circle, like we were brought up with firearms. Like we were trained how to be responsible with those firearms. Most of us, if not all of us, have actually paid to go through additional training or have gone through military training. And again, there's like a process that's in place. And like, we even have those like for firearms in Texas, like when I first started, when I first went down that path, like I had to go get a license and I had to go sit in classes and I paid for additional training, to go through that. And again, it's like, there's these processes in place and there's criteria and there's minimum standards and there's things that like you need to do to demonstrate that like you are ready for the responsibility of being a United States citizen. You're ready for the responsibility to carry a firearm. And so when I think about it more from the standpoint of like, the checks and balances that are already in place, like, I think there's an argument for like, well, there's part of me wants to say, yes, you should be able to protect your family. Like you should be able to protect yourself to the extent that everyone else can. But at the same time, I'm like, man, like if that's now a question, it's like when if somebody's coming into this country and like now there's this need where someone feels like they need to be given a firearm, it's like, what's wrong with the process? Like what's wrong with this process to where like we feel like this person is in danger and that they have to have a firearm? Like there's still a lot of questions for me around that one.
Yeah, we are accused of just pandering to the right wing base. They're saying that what we talk about is right wing propaganda. But is it really propaganda to just ask that everybody is held to the same standard? Is it propaganda to actually look critically at what's going on in our nation and ask why and provide solutions to obvious problems that we have? Like, I don't think so. And no, I know it's not. So to be accused of this is like, I think what, when we made this podcast, we're saying, look, there's an epidemic here and things are endemic here in the United States that we really do need to turn around. I mean, we're on a collision course for chaos with how things are being run right now. And so we just want people to own their lives, personal responsibility, understanding that nobody is going to come for you. And ultimately, like you were saying, you don't believe that the government has the best interests of the citizenship at mind, and it clearly it doesn't. Now, it may at the state level. Texas is trying to secure the border, and then the federal government, who is, not really able to dictate everything that Texas is doing, but is saying, no, you just need to let them in. Like, that's the nice thing. That's the compassionate thing to do. But, like, inherent in the decision to come into the United States illegally is a choice to make a criminal action. Like, you are you're violating the sovereignty of the United States, which has protocols and procedures for coming in legally. Now, I get why a lot of people leave and want to come in here and don't want to have to go through the normal channels, because that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of money. Maybe they don't have that. I get it. And I'm not saying that their motivations to come into the United States are wrong. I don't think that they're evil, but the fact of the matter is, like, there is a right and a wrong way to do it. And if you do it the wrong way and get caught, you should be moved out of the country, and you shouldn't be allowed back in. Like, and this is
we
where,
shouldn't
again,
get a gift card and a mobile phone and a free pass to go get a firearm.
Right.
Gosh, man, this whole thing is just, it's so frustrating. On both sides. The thing that bothers me the most is, it's like, if there was ever something to get people to come off of the fences and to come sit down at a table together and actually, like, figure out how to solve these, like, this would be it. Like, I mean, we're talking about the future of the country. Like, if there was ever a time to set differences aside and, like, okay, let's actually solve this problem. Let's look at the way that people have been coming to the country. Let's make the improvements. Like, I mean, gosh, man, one, if you don't want to go through the appropriate channels, then there's two things, right? One, it's either, okay, well, if you have the money and you don't want to, why don't you want to go through that? If you don't have the money, obviously, like, that's a challenge. And I mean, if we're willing to give them, like, free gift cards, why aren't we willing to give them some kind of loan? Like, this is how much it costs, like, to go through this process. Like, so the government's going to give you a loan. It's a low interest loan. You're going to have a really long time to pay it back. Like, I don't see how there's got to be some other ways. Like, I am obviously not an expert in this, but, like, the one thing I can tell you from helping run a good number of companies and dealing with lots of different people that have differing viewpoints and ways of doing things, like, there's a way to get people at the table. There's a way to get people to sit down and to work through these problems intelligently. I mean, at this point, I mean, things may be too far gone for that to happen, but if there was ever a situation to do it, like, this would be it. I mean, just again, going back to 87,000 children unaccounted for, like, that, but that alone should motivate every person to stop what they're doing, sit down at the table, and, like, get this figured out.
Yeah, for those who are listening and wonder what Nate is referencing, if you go to our episode with Matt Murphy, who is the founder of the Sentinel Foundation,
it's the president.
He talks about he talks about how 87,000 undocumented children have just disappeared. And on top of that, he talks about how his relationships with people in DHS estimate that anywhere from 10 to 40 million illegals have come into the country since the beginning of the Biden administration. So that's full context, and that's in the episodes if you want to go through Patreon on purpose to see that. But I do think that there is a plan around this. It's not through happenstance or negligence that this is being allowed to take place. I mean, you don't create 320,000 plane tickets for people and fly them in if you didn't have ulterior motives, or if you weren't trying to get something done, because that was not cheap. And orchestrating that just from a strategic level must have been a massive undertaking, notwithstanding the amount of money that you would have to invest to do it.
Well, and the amount of red tape that's just being completely ignored, to even pull that off. I mean, you're literally. So all of the citizens of the United States are still going through security checkpoints and still going through all of those hoops, but the conversations and decisions were made, like, at the the government level, airline level, and now these people are hopping on planes without government IDs,
right,
and they're just going wherever. I don't know what the algorithm is there, who's going where and why, or if there's any thought behind it. But
I'm sure they're going to red states, because I think one of the funniest things about all of this is when you've got Abbott putting them on buses. He's like, fine, if they're going to come here, we're going to go ahead and send them off to a place that's a sanctuary city. Right. And then the first thing that those people do is like reject them. They're like, no, you can't possibly be here. You're going to put an economic strain on our city. You're going to disrupt things the way that they're running in their current capacity. And they try and kick them out. It's like, it's one of those things where it's a rule for thee, but not for me. And I think that you see that with anybody in politics. Again, like we've talked about this ad nauseum. There's a very small percentage of people, in my opinion, who are in politics, especially congressional level or Senate, who are interested in making your life better. They're about making their own lives better. I mean, I saw just the other day, like Dan Crenshaw posted something, and I forget. He's a House of Representatives, congressional representative for Texas. And the comments, man, oh my gosh, like the dude just got reamed. He had done Liver King's Barbarian, and everybody's just like, like that's a really cool thing to do. And if you have the respect of people, then they're going to be like, congratulations, I can't believe you accomplished that. But everybody's just like, you're a turncoat, you're this, you're that. Like this guy, he's not a freshman any longer, but he's only been there for a couple years, and everybody is looking at him as like the particular example of what it looks like to be corrupt. I mean, this guy, he gave a lot in service of his country, and then he gets to the Senate or to the House of Representatives, and who benefits the most? He does. And what happens to his constituents? They're getting pooped on. Like Dan Crenshaw is pooping on his constituents. Make that a clip. He'll come after me. He can at me, but everybody in Texas knows it's true.
There has been a massive shift for a lot of people as it relates to him. It's been unfortunate to watch. But I saw that. Like, what else? Do we want to go down that path? What else is going on there?
You mean with Dan Crenshaw or just in general? I mean, it's just something that, like, he did exactly what John McCain did. I mean, what John McCain went through when he was interned in prison during the Vietnam War it's horrendous to think about. And then he comes and starts serving in the capacity that he did as a senator for numerous years, and he enriched himself, and his constituents were left in the dust. And that's why, he's a neocon, or was a neocon. And like all he was doing was saber rattling, trying to, rally the military industrial complex, for the lack of a better term, so that he could benefit off of it. I mean, when you look at the average net worth of anybody who goes into Congress in any capacity and then exits, and you realize that, wow, they increased their net worth 1,000 to 10,000%. Like, you have to ask the question, like, why did they even want to serve in the first place? I think most people are going in there, to be honest, not with the motivations to better the people who they count as constituents in their district, but knowing that, hey, this is a path towards self-enrichment and me being able to mobilize this vast network of people to make my life better. Again, maybe they started off at a long time ago with thinking, hey, I can probably do something for people. I can probably help lift people out of poverty or this, that, or the other. But, if you listen to the episode, I think it's Sean Ryan and Eli Crane. So yeah. Eli Crane is a good one. Yeah, he's a representative for Arizona, interestingly enough. And he talks about pretty plainly, like, what happens. Now, he can't shed light on everything, but it's just like you go to D.C. and you are presented with blue pill or red pill. And everybody is like taking that blue pill, because why wouldn't you? Like, if that's where you end up and you realize that the only way to get things done is to grease the wheels. The only way to move forward in your career is to do this. The only way to get a bill passed is to do that. You're going to compromise more than you otherwise would, because you're like, well, I think that this is the best way to get things done. And then all of a sudden you've compromised enough and you've benefited from it so many times that you're like, I can continue on this track. And it's kind of funny because, like, we just did, the Myers-Briggs assessment for our company, and you're not surprised by this, but my ability to compromise was my least, where I was ranked the worst. Like, I will not compromise. And that's why I won't ever run for office anyways. Like, I just wouldn't compromise to start. So, like, it's a non-starter that I would ever go into office, because, like, if they're like, well, if you want to get this done, you're going to have to do this, I just think, no, I'm not doing that. So I wouldn't get anything done. And that's fine. Like, I think that's where term limits would be really helpful because like if I ever
Yeah.
did get in office, I would just want to go in there and F stuff up, man. Just be like, bah, and then leave 4 years or 6 years later and just be like, I did my
No,
job.
I can validate for anybody out there that's listening to this. That's exactly what Adam would go do. Um, man, well, this is it's where it's so dangerous where business and politics like intersect, right? I mean, even going back to the illegal aliens flying all over the United States, it's like, I think there was a pretty big bailout some years back for the airlines with the government, and if you start having have the
just
airlines
during COVID. Yeah.
right, so we got like we have a group as it relates to the infrastructure of our country and how people can move about, and they are deeply in debt to the government, and then the government comes knocking on the door and says, hey, like, you're gonna do this. How do you push back on that?
Right.
And same thing with the politicians. I mean, if they're benefiting from, however that goes down, and then when it comes time for for them to pay the piper, like, I mean, they're if they're in somebody's pocket, then it's pretty clear what happens. So I mean, again, it's like, yeah, these are just the things that, like, man, like, is it just too far gone for there to be an actual correction?
I think that it's been too far gone since the dawn of time, right? Like basically after Eve ate the apple and sin entered into the world, it was too far gone. And that's the whole beauty of the gospel, is that you have restoration through Jesus Christ, and your hope is not in man-made institutions in righting the wrongs of the world. It's in Jesus and his kingship. So
Absolutely.
I do think it is too far gone. I think that it's going to look better in some ways. And this is a really interesting thing where, people are always like, oh, the whole reason that the United States is in this position right now, like the real conspiracy theory is like, Marxism has been injected into modern day politics. And so really it's the Marxists that are trying to win things out. I don't think that's actually true. I think Marxism is a convenient scapegoat, but I really do believe that the reason that things are too far gone at this stage, and the new solution to everything, is going to be the movement towards transhumanism. And I know that's a really big jump for a conversation, but Marxism is just one of those things where it's like, okay, yeah, like there's the bogeyman. We can go ahead and point our fingers at the Marxists and the socialists and say, oh man, they're terrible. And I do believe that they're actually pretty terrible, but the idea here is that, like, with transhumanism, like, all of a sudden we're not going to have to worry about politics ruining our lives any longer, because people will be able to live forever, and they really will be able to live forever with the transhumanist movement. And like all the problems that are present in society will disappear, because it's like, okay, well, now you don't have to worry about dying early. You don't have to worry about starving. You don't have to worry about all of these things. And so I think if, like,
for anybody that's out there that doesn't actually know what you're talking about, like, could you actually explain that a little bit?
Sure. Well, transhumanism is something that the futurists, which are basically a group of or a collective of people in the technology industry, which would who are focused on learning how to live forever. So whether that's through genetic manipulation, figuring out how we can lengthen part of our genome, something called the telomere, so that it can just continue on replicating. Now I'm really screwing things up, but just being able to live longer through genetics, or being able to upload your consciousness to the cloud, or being able to do, well, how would I say this? Like, just figuring out a bunch of different ways, like, that we would be able to live forever. So that's why AI is a big thing. That's why nanotech is a big thing right now, where people are warning about the impending danger of nanotechnology. We should do an episode on it where I can talk about it a little bit more succinctly and a little bit more knowledgeably, because it's been a long time since I've studied it. But
that might even be worth finding somebody to come on and an expert to come on and us actually dive into it deep with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, if we could get Tim Alberino on, who is incredibly knowledgeable about the dangers of transhumanism. But the idea is that, like, people would cease to be people the way that we are right now, a biological being. We would be either a cyborg, so blended between biology and technology, or at one point, like, the argument is that AI would replace humans, or humans would become like you would see in the Matrix, that we're just nothing but batteries for the machine. And so that's the real danger. That's why I think when you say, are we too far gone? Yes, but if the solution is transhumanism, that's a far worse solution than any kind of political solution that could be contrived by people. So it's where things are headed, definitely within the next 100 years, if not sooner. Is the whole Elon Musk, like, hey, we've really got to worry about this. We've got to dial this stuff back. Like, you don't know what you're doing. It's Prometheus playing with fire.
Got it. Yeah, no, that makes sense, man. I love the way that you pulled, human nature into it, and sin and Jesus. Like, those are all accurate, and it also kind of brings it back around to the ways in which our society was set up. I mean, it was set up based upon, what it is that we all learn in the Bible, which, gives us the laws, gives us, the basic, I mean, for lack of better description, just the rules for the way that we live, like, in a law abiding way, in a way that's structured and organized, that enables us to know how to interact with each other, like what's right, what's wrong. And the further we move away from that, we're heading towards very dangerous waters.
Yeah, it's a big problem with like the big EVA, or a big evangelical movement that you've seen over the past 8 years since Trump was elected in 2016. Like, all of a sudden, like, people were pinning their hopes on a politician as opposed to Jesus as king. And so, and this is something you probably see in families all across the United States, where people are, again, like, they're just stumping for a particular candidate, saying this is the way that we are able to improve our lives, this is the way we're able to improve our country, when in fact the things that are going to allow this country to prosper are right there in front of you. Like, how do you love your husband or your wife better? How do you love your children better? How do you love the people around you better? Like, man, dude, right now, part of the reason I came into this conversation even in a funk is, like, last night my wife and I had a conversation where, here I am thinking I'm making these improvements in our relationship, and she's like, yeah, well, you're still not doing this very well, and you're not doing this very well. Like, it's not a divorce worthy problem, but it's like living in a house where something's broken and you just kind of learn to live with it. And I've been living with it for a while. I'm like, my gosh, like, I thought I am getting better all the time, and here you are explaining that no, in fact, like, you are getting better in some places, but you're still not doing very well. And that's the commitment that I have.
I can't tell you how many times, like, I've thought I've been doing, like, great, and it's like, and then you find out, like, okay, yeah, no, you've been doing this and this over here, but this thing that I've been, like, I've just stopped asking you about it because I no longer believe that you're actually going to change. It's just like, like, okay, okay, like, let's unpack this, please. Like, all right, like, walk me through, like, it's first you got to, like, there's that, I don't know how you react, but my initial reaction to that is, I have varying reactions, but I typically first I'll get a little defensive, then I kind of go more of like then I get mad at myself, and it's like this, there's this reaction, then there's an overcorrection, and then I start kind of coming back to the middle, and it's like, okay, let's unpack this. Like, I obviously can be loving and supporting and serving this family better, so, like, help me understand this. Oh man, yeah, those are gut wrenching.
Yeah, I'm the same as you, defensive. Like, I cross my arms, I start breathing heavy, and like
the deep breath with the sigh, like,
yeah. My point here is that if we can, everybody globally can just learn to live in our relationships with more intention and with the thought of the other superseding ours, which is never going to happen in this lifetime while we are actually alive, but that's the best way for this country to improve. Now, of course, we need to call out evil for what it is. Like, we can't just let evil things happen and let it skate on by. But what am I going to do about people getting flown across the United States border? Nothing. I can't do a dang thing. I mean, I can make this podcast and we can rally the base and we can just say, hey, this is not right. We need to do something about it. But I have to love my wife well first. I have to love my kids well second. I have to love the people that I work with. I have to learn how to do.
Got to take care of yourself too.
Yeah. What can I control? Like, I can control those things. I can't control the other things. I think that when we bring everything together, though, like when we're saying, hey, there's 150 million of us that think that this is the right way to do things. Sure, there's a collective, and that can actually have an impact. But I don't think that you're even able to make those kinds of sound decisions if you're not loving well in your immediate sphere, anyways. And
Yeah, no, I agree, man. It's one of the reasons, like, over the years when I've been building teams, again, kind of going back to just a, business example, like, we don't just interview like the person that we're looking to bring into a high level role. We're interviewing their spouse. We're looking at how they function, like, in that sense as well. Because if someone's not managing the personal side of their life well, if they're not loving their spouse well, if they're not loving their kids well, I mean, it's the same reason, like in churches, like, when they're interviewing elders, like, is this person actually really walking the walk? Like, are they living in their life in a way to where, like, they can also not just, like, because if the personal part of your life is out of control, like you're not going to be able to, like, have a lasting impact positively. Eventually the gig will be up, like, and whatever carnage you've left in your wake, will rear its head. It's just the way the world operates and the way we as humans operate. Like, you just can't hide from that stuff forever.
Yeah, and even if everything, and if everything around you was going well, like the country is in a state of bliss, which would never happen, but your life, your actual personal life is falling apart. Well, cool. You've got no illegal immigration, and this is happening for you. All the things that you want are finally taking place, and your wife hates you. Your kids don't like you. They don't want to be around you. Then that was all for naught. And
yeah, it was for nothing.
I think that's why. Yeah, it's just one of those things where I think it's a both and, though. Like, you want a country where your children are safe, where your spouse is safe, where you feel like you actually can thrive, where opportunity abounds, and you don't have to fear that something could destabilize that. So, of course, like, politics are, they're downstream from culture, and culture is formed by what is happening in the family unit. So I think that it's one of those things that is going to take up a lot of, it's going to preoccupy you. It's going to take up some mental space, but
yeah. Well, I think if to pull out, like, a point of what I think you're pointing at when you're talking about, like, your personal life and your family, your wife, or your spouse, your children, if you are, man, I had a point. If you've got that locked down, like, because again, that's the number one area that, like, if you look at anything that's fallen apart over the last, like, 50 years, it's been the family. Mm-hmm. So, like, if you can get that locked down and you can fortify that, like, then, so I would say, so, because I guess, so if anyone's out there listening to this, I know it sounds kind of bleak, and we're talking about how things are too far gone, and that's part of that's just human nature. And if you're a believer, you know how the story ends. So at the end of the day, we can all stand firmly on that. But if we're looking for something to take action on in the immediate, I think, especially, I can't speak to how women respond to this. At least not from my personal experience. As guys, like, we always go towards, like, oh, I'd die for my family, or, like, I would do this. And we think of these massive moments of being courageous. And it's like, the most courageous thing that you could do in the way that you could take action right now is to love your wife well, pray with your wife, pray over your children, pray over the people that in everything that is around you that you have an immediate impact on. Lock that down. Get everybody on the same page, like, lead well. And, like, that's where you're going to have the immediate impact. Protect the family first. And then from there, like, as that's fortified, I think then you can start looking outward and start figuring out, like, what you can do from there.
Yeah, and I think when I say too far gone, I don't mean it in the sense that, like, the world is going to end tomorrow, but sure, there is no permanent solution to the present trials that we face. It's just going to have a different face at a different time. But if you focus on those things immediately in front of you, like, one, your family, and I know that I'm speaking from the place of somebody who is married with kids, like, other people's positions or situations are going to be different, but even then there's, like, relationships that you have that you can foster and that you can develop. And if you're focusing well or intentionally on those for the improvement of other people, if everything around you is spinning out of control, like those things are what will give you life. Those things, those relationships are going to be what
Absolutely.
bring you a richness of experience where you're like, okay, things are bad, but I'm actually in a really good place. And especially like the relationship with God. And I know that not everybody listening to this is a believer. Maybe this will cause you to want to open up a Bible and figure some things out for yourself. I would encourage you to start in Proverbs. If you've ever wanted to do that and didn't know where to start, that's a great book. But the relationship with God is what gives you a firm foundation to be able to say, though the world around me is a tempest and things are upside down, we live in a clown world, all the things that we're saying right now, you have a hope. And that hope is actually a person. His name is Jesus. And then like with hoping in him and having faith in him and like looking at how to model your life after what he says to do, then everything that you do with the relationships that you have will be impacted. They will be better. And that's the thing is like when I'm saying my day today was rough because of yesterday, like my relationship with my wife now is better than it's ever been. And it was just one of those things where I've always wanted to get better. And when I think I'm doing well, like you said, you get, knocked down a peg or two. You're like, oh, dang it. Well, I didn't think I thought I was improved and I am, but it's just those smaller things. It's like, oh, whatever. So
no, but I love the point you made about, for the people out there that don't have a spouse or have kids, it's like one, you still, and maybe some people maybe there's some people that don't actually have any family or they are separated from their family. Like family takes all sorts of forms. Like it could be, any part of the community that you are sharing space with. I mean, shoot, man, it could be if you're at the CrossFit gym. I mean, like you got people that you're doing life with, like, or people you're working with. Like it's, family takes all forms. Like, so it's your community. So it's like, I would say your immediate community, like you can have a fantastic impact there first by leading and loving well. And by leading, I don't mean like barking orders or taking charge or telling people what to do. Lots of times leading is just being there to listen, support, and be there for people, and help people, think through the things that they're trying to do and make decisions. And, leadership, again, it's one of those things that sometimes is done from behind, not in the front.
Yeah. And leading by example, just showing other people like how you can be supportive and listening and also encouraging. That's another one. Speaking to people who don't have families, like, or who even may be lonely, like I can imagine that somebody's listening to this podcast and the circle of people that they interact with is very small owing to their job or just whatever. Like that's another opportunity for you to invest into other people. So, serving at a soup kitchen or doing anything where you're now like sacrificing a small bit of your time and energy for the benefit of others is a really good way to at least practice that. I mean, that's what I did before I was married and I was single in Denver and I was addicted to drugs and I knew I wanted out. And I was just like, okay, what's the easiest thing that I can do right now to take the focus off of myself? Yeah. Because like I hate myself right now and how can I improve my life? And so I just started working with homeless people. Yeah. And, that's actually right around that time is when I got freed from drugs. Within a year of doing that, like this intentional focus on others so that I could actually improve my own life, but knowing that by focusing on others and their well-being, my life would improve, I ended up getting married. So it's like, I know those things can work. And then of course, like one of the things that a lot of parents, especially parents with young kids find out is they're like, man, I don't really have like a mission field, as we say in the church. Like I'm not out there serving the mission field. Well, the mission field are the people right in front of you. And so that's the thing that you can control how you respond to your children. You can control how you respond to your spouse. Doing what you can actually control and focusing on that is the best way to, one, improve your own life and also the world around you. I believe that 100%.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think if anyone does any level of research, like they'll find expert after expert and person that, and any, always say experts, people that have been living life, that there's, if you are in a funk or you are in a just a stretch of road that like you were just hitting pothole after pothole, there's no better way to find a smoother surface than to go and just, try and breathe life into other people by just serving. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it's the whole aspect of gratitude. Like as soon as you realize that you have things to be thankful for and you practice gratitude, then the whole of your life will, like at least your perspective will begin to change. Like all of a sudden, instead of being despondent and self-hating, you're going to realize, wow, like my life is actually pretty good. And
Yeah.
that's one of those things where then once you begin to be thankful for what you have, then you realize, oh, I actually have something to offer. I have time, I have energy, I have money, whatever it is, and I can begin to offer that to other people. And that's where, this is regardless of whether or not you're married or single. Like the thing about it is relationships are the most important part of living this life. You've got all these people, like going back to the illegal aliens, you've got all these people who are fleeing to this country because they either are escaping negative relationships or they're trying to improve the relationships that they have with friends and family because they see that there's economic opportunity over here. You've got all of these criminals who have come over here illegally, became criminals largely because they didn't have relationships with healthy people, and they escaped into gang relationships where people acted as a surrogate family, and now they're doing something, they're doing evil things because like that's the relationship that they are holding fast to. So
yeah, they're I mean, gosh, one of the biggest, love is it, man.
Yep.
Love is it. And I think, if we want to really get down to the root of what a lot is, the root or what is at the source of a lot of, I think the problems that we're seeing now, like, is the absence of love in people's lives. It's, we're watching what social media is doing to artificially stimulate people. But in reality, it's actually pulling them further away from like actual real lasting, relationships and the things that I think enable somebody to feel loved. And it snuck up on us. I don't think anybody realized, to the extent that, and it's not just social media. There's all sorts of things that are happening now that are spiraling out of control. But the one common thread there is like it does seem to be pulling people further and further away from the true source of love.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Well, man, I don't know how we went from illegal aliens being allowed to carry firearms to talking about love, but it seems appropriate.
Well, yeah, I think that, like you said, love is all that matters. And unfortunately, love is not present in a lot of people's lives, or like it's been the idea of what love means or has been perverted, certainly over these past 10, 15 years. So it's really important that people understand that loving others and loving God is what is going to give life meaning and value, and it's going to determine the lens, or it's like it is a good lens to look at life through, because like if you can do that, even in small degrees, nobody's going to be able to do that perfectly, but if you can learn to love others and love yourself less, then it has this net effect of raising the temperature and making life worth living. Because if somebody loved you in a way that you don't deserve, and you can do that to others, then all of a sudden, like, we find that we can galvanize around a lot of things, but the most important thing is just this common thread of being human and experiencing a very hard life together, and then just injecting love into it makes it bearable, and it also can give it joy and peace and meaning.
We're all just walking each other home.
Yeah. All right, well, I think we can go here. Before we sign off, though, I think that it would be a really good idea to let people know that if you've enjoyed this conversation, whether you're on Apple, Spotify, Google, whatever, please do review. Anytime you put a review out there, it lets the tech lords know that you did like this conversation, and it'll put it in front of more people. And, of course, don't forget to subscribe or follow. Find us on our website, patriotonpurpose.com, if you want to join our newsletter. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
Thank you, everyone.